Hey everyone, and welcome back. Today we are diving deep into Simon Sinek's Find Your Why.
A book I'm sure many of you have dog-eared pages in by now.
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those books you just end up marking up like crazy.
So many good insights.
Well, let's jump right into those insights. This whole concept of finding your why, your purpose, it's something people talk about a lot, but this book really breaks it down.
It does, and it gives you a framework for actually uncovering that deeper motivation. Because let's be honest, so many of us get caught up in the what of our work without ever really understanding the why.
I know I'm guilty of that.
And it's not our fault. We're often conditioned to think that way, but taking the time to uncover that why, it can really transform your whole perspective on your career.
It's like suddenly seeing your work through a whole new lens.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about Sinek's Golden Circle. I remember highlighting that like crazy when I first read the book.
Yeah, that's a big one.
It's that idea of the WHY, the HOW, and the what, right?
Exactly. It's a simple concept, but so powerful.
So how does it work again?
Well, most people communicate from the outside in.
So like starting with the what?
Exactly. They start with what they do, their job title, the product they sell, the tasks they complete. But Sinek argues that truly inspiring leaders and organizations, they communicate from the inside out. They start with their WHY.
So instead of leading with, I'm a software developer, it's more like, I create tools that empower people to connect and share their stories. Something like that.
Exactly. It's about the deeper purpose driving your work.
And that's what really resonates with people.
Yes, because when you lead with your WHY, you're tapping into something much more powerful than just a transactional exchange. You're connecting with people on the level of values and beliefs.
It's funny, this reminds me of Apple. Now, I'm not a tech person by any means, but even I find myself getting swept up in their marketing.
Oh, absolutely. They're masters at it.
They're not just selling phones and laptops. They're selling innovation, creativity, a way of thinking. It's like they've created this tribe.
You're exactly right. It's about tapping into that emotional connection, that sense of belonging. And that reminds me of the story about Steve, the steel salesman. Do you remember that one?
Oh, yeah, I loved that story.
It perfectly illustrates how knowing your why can transform even a seemingly mundane job.
Because on the surface, Steel Salesman, it doesn't sound like the most glamorous career.
Right. But he was so passionate about it.
It was.
And that passion came from his WHY. He wasn't just selling steel beams. He was contributing to a greener future by providing materials for sustainable construction projects.
Oh, right. He was really into sustainable building materials.
And that connection to a larger purpose, that's what made his work so fulfilling.
It's amazing how a simple shift in perspective can make such a difference. Suddenly, he's not just pushing a product, he's part of a bigger movement. And it makes you wonder, how do we figure out our own WHY?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
It is, because it feels kind of big and vague when you first start thinking about it.
Yeah. Right, but Sinek provides a really practical framework for this, and a big part of it is about identifying those key moments in your past that really shaped you.
Oh, you mean like defining experiences that reveal our core values?
Exactly. He talks about digging into specific memories and the emotions associated with them.
Okay, so this is where I always get tripped up. I start thinking in these vague terms like, oh, I'm a hard worker or I'm creative. But the book really pushes you to go deeper, right?
Totally. It's about identifying the specific stories that demonstrate those values in action.
So instead of just saying, I'm helpful, it's more about thinking back to a time when you went above and beyond to help someone.
Yes, and really recalling the details of that experience, how it made you feel.
It's about connecting with the emotional core of it, not just putting a label on it.
Exactly.
It's less about what you did and more about why you did it.
Yes, like with Todd and the lemonade stand. Do you remember that story?
Oh, yes. That story really stuck with me. And it wasn't like some grand heroic gesture or anything, but it clearly had a huge impact on him.
It did. And that's what I love about that story. It shows that you don't need these big dramatic moments to uncover your why.
It's often the small, seemingly insignificant moments that reveal the most about us.
Absolutely.
So remind me about Todd again. Been a bit since I read that story.
So Todd was just a young boy, and he saw this little girl who was upset because she didn't have enough money for lemonade.
Oh, right.
And without hesitation, Todd gave her the spare change he had in his pocket.
Such a simple act of kindness.
Right. But for Todd, that was a turning point.
Really? How so?
It was like this moment of clarity. He realized that giving that little girl his change, it brought him more joy than anything he could have bought with it.
It opened his eyes to the power of giving.
Exactly. And that experience stayed with him. It became a guiding principle in his life. It wasn't about the money itself. It was about the impact he had.
It's about paying attention to those moments where you feel truly alive, where your actions align with your values, and something just clicks.
Yes. Those are the clues that lead you to your WHY.
It's like those hidden object games where you have to sift through all the clutter to find the treasure.
I love that analogy.
But in this case, the treasure is hidden in our own memories.
It is, and sometimes it takes a little digging to uncover those hidden gems. Speaking of uncovering hidden gems, you know what else I found fascinating? Emily's interview story.
Oh, yes. Tell me about that. She actually used her WHY to land a job.
She did. Now that's putting this stuff into practice.
Okay, so tell me everything. How did that go down?
So Emily's in this job interview, and instead of just listing off her skills and experience like everyone else.
Right, the usual song and dance.
Exactly. She starts by sharing her WHY
What was her why?
to help people reach their full potential.
Wow. Okay, I'm not gonna lie, that's a bold move. I probably would have chickened out and stuck with the usual script.
I know, right? But it completely changed the dynamic of the interview.
I bet. Did they just hand her the job on the spot?
Well, not quite, but the interviewers were blown away. They actually told her that her answer, it was a major factor in their decision to hire her.
See, that's what I love about this book. It's full of those aha moments that make you see things in a whole new light.
It is.
Because, let's be honest, job interviews can be terrifying.
They can be.
Anything that helps you stand out, anything that helps you connect with the interviewers on a human level, that's gold.
It is. And it all circles back to that idea of communicating from the inside out.
Starting with your WHY.
Exactly, because when you lead with your why, you're not just selling yourself, you're inviting people to connect with your purpose.
Yeah.
And that's incredibly powerful.
It's like that saying, people don't buy what you do, they buy why you do it.
Exactly.
And that got me thinking about this whole nested WHYs concept.
Oh, yes. The Russian nesting doll.
Right. You open one to find another one inside.
It's this idea that your personal WHY, it can fit within a larger team or organizational WHY.
So give me an example of that. How does that work in the real world?
Okay, so imagine a company whose WHY is to create a more sustainable future.
Okay, I like it.
Their marketing team's WHY might be to educate consumers about eco-friendly choices.
So same overarching purpose, but on different scales.
Exactly. And when those WHYs are aligned, it creates this incredible sense of shared purpose.
It's like everyone's working toward the same goal, but from different angles.
Exactly.
I imagine that kind of alignment, it can be incredibly motivating for a team. You're not just showing up for a paycheck. You're part of something bigger.
Absolutely. And it's not just about motivation. It's about making decisions that are consistent with those shared values.
So it's not enough to just have a WHY. You have to actually live it out in your actions.
Exactly. And that's where the HOW comes in. The book talks a lot about the importance of identifying not just your why, but also your HOWs.
Right. Because it's one thing to say, I want to make a difference in the world, but how do you actually do that?
Yes.
And I think that's what trips a lot of people up. It can feel overwhelming to think about taking action on your WHY.
I get that.
But the HOWs, that's where things start to get really interesting. And that's what we'll dive into next time.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Find Your Why. Last time, we left off on the edge of our seats talking about HOWs.
Right. We dug deep into the WHY, our purpose, but this idea of HOWs.
It's the good stuff.
It is. It's the missing piece of the puzzle. It's the bridge between knowing our WHY and actually living it.
Yes. It's the how we bring our why to life. It's about understanding our unique strength, our natural inclinations, and how those influence the actions we take.
Okay, so give me a concrete example. How do HOWs play out in the real world?
Well, the book tells this great story about the authors David Mead and Peter Docker and how their individual HOWs complement each other perfectly.
Teamwork. Ooh, I love a good teamwork story.
Right, it's a good one.
Yeah.
So they had to adapt this workshop for a much larger audience than they were used to.
Oh, wow. Talk about pressure.
Right. So they both share that WHY of helping people be their best selves, but their HOWs are where things get interesting.
Okay, now I'm picturing them as this dynamic duo with, like, complementary superpowers.
Yes. I love it.
What were their strengths?
So David, he's the big picture guy, the strategist, always thinking 10 steps ahead.
I know the type.
Right? And then Peter, he excels at taking those complex ideas and making them crystal clear, super accessible.
So it's like David paints the masterpiece and Peter builds the perfect frame for it.
Yes, exactly.
I love that.
And both prioritize strategy before action. So that's like their shared HOW. So Faced with this workshop challenge, they don't just jump in blindly. They huddle, strategize, come up with a plan, but then their individual styles come through.
Okay, so tell me how that played out.
Well, David, always the innovator, thrives on thinking outside the box, adapting on the fly.
Okay.
Peter, the master of clarity, brings structure and simplicity, even in chaotic situations.
So it's like David throws out these brilliant, maybe slightly wild ideas, and then Peter's there to rein them in just enough to make them actually doable.
You got it. Exactly. David was brainstorming all these creative solutions, while Peter ensured that those solutions could be implemented clearly and effectively.
See, that's the beauty of teamwork, right? When you have different strengths that complement each other. And this whole HOWs thing is making me rethink my last team project at work. We had so much talent on that team, but it felt like we were constantly tripping over each other. Maybe if we had understood our HOWs better, we could have been way more effective.
It's amazing how these seemingly simple concepts can have such a profound impact on how we work and collaborate.
They really can, because we often focus so much on what needs to get done that we forget about the how, and sometimes even the why.
Yes, exactly. And another point the book makes is that HOWs can be incredibly valuable filters, especially when you're evaluating new opportunities.
Filters, you mean like a spam filter for my career?
Exactly. They help you determine if an opportunity truly aligns with your values and work style. And even Simon Sinek himself, he uses his HOWs as a guide.
Wait, really? I need to hear about this.
Oh, yeah. He tells this story of how this leader from, huge organization approached him about this project. And on paper, it seemed perfect. It was all about creating a more people-centric culture.
Which aligns perfectly with Simon's WHY.
Exactly. But then during the meeting, the leader whips out this incredibly complex flowchart, emphasizing, quick results.
Oh, no. I can already see where this is going.
Right. And one of Simon's core HOWs is keep it simple.
Oh, yeah. He talks a lot about that in the book.
He does. Clear communication, straightforward approaches. And that flowchart, it just screamed complexity.
Yeah, and the pressure for quick wins. That's a red flag right there.
It is. Because real change takes time.
It does. It's not about quick fixes. It's about putting in the work to create something meaningful and sustainable.
Exactly. So even though the project's goal it resonated with his WHY, the HRW, the way they wanted to approach it just didn't align.
So what did he do?
He politely declined.
Wow. You know what? That takes guts.
It does.
Because it's so easy to get caught up in the excitement of a big opportunity.
It is.
But sometimes walking away is the braver choice. And ultimately the more fulfilling one, too.
Yes. And it shows how understanding your HOWs can empower you to make those tough decisions, the ones that are true to yourself and your values.
So it's like having a compass. It keeps you on course.
I love that analogy.
Because our WHY might be pulling us in one direction, but our HOWs are like, hold on a second, is this really the best way to get there?
Exactly. It's about having that inner guidance system. Helps you stay aligned, even when you're faced with, tempting detours.
Okay, so we've talked about HOWs on a personal level, but I'm curious, how do HOWs play out on an organizational level? Because the book does talk about that, right?
It does. And there's this powerful example about Southwest Airlines. It beautifully illustrates how a company's WHY can, permeate its entire culture, even in the smallest interactions.
Yes, the story about the captain helping with the luggage.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. It was such a small gesture, but it spoke volumes about their culture.
It did. So the flight was delayed, passengers were getting antsy.
I've been there. Not fun.
Right. And instead of just standing by, the captain notices a flight attendant. She's struggling to load this, heavy luggage into the overhead bin, and without hesitation, he steps in to help.
It was such a human moment. And you could tell it wasn't some PR stunt. It felt like a genuine reflection of their values.
Exactly. Because their WHY, to care for their employees, who in turn care for their customers, it's so deeply ingrained in their culture. It wasn't about following a rule. It was about living their WHY.
It's those everyday actions, those small acts of kindness and respect that really reveal the true spirit of an organization.
Absolutely. But what happens when companies lose sight of that?
Right, because it does happen.
It does.
Companies lose their way. They get caught up in the bottom line and forget about the human element.
Yes. Sinek calls it the split. When a company's actions become disconnected from their original purpose.
Like they're going through the motions, but the heart's not in it anymore.
Exactly. And it can happen for all sorts of reasons. Rapid growth, changes in leadership. Sometimes it's just the pressure to keep up with the competition.
It's like they start chasing profits or market share, and they forget what made them special in the first place.
Yeah,
It's kind of sad, actually.
it can be, especially for the people who work there.
Well, what about the companies that are doing it right, that are actively fighting against that split?
Yes.
I need some hope here.
Sinek mentions Ultimate Software as a great example.
Okay, I've heard of them. What's their secret? Do they have mandatory Find Your Why workshops every Monday morning or something?
No, it's more about consistently weaving their why into every aspect of the business. Their policies, their decisions, their hiring practices.
So it's not just lip service. It's about actually walking the talk.
Yes, and they do this brilliant job of using storytelling to reinforce their why.
Oh, I love a good story.
Right, real-life examples of how their values are being lived out, big and small.
Because stories are powerful.
They are.
It's not just telling people about your WHY, it's showing them what it looks like in action.
Exactly, and because they're real stories, they resonate, they inspire, they remind everyone why they choose to be a part of that company.
It creates that sense of shared purpose.
Yes.
That feeling of belonging to something bigger than yourself.
Exactly. And that, ultimately, is the power of living your why, both as individuals and as organizations. It's about aligning your actions with your values, making choices that reflect what truly matters to you, and in doing so, inspiring others to do the same.
I love that.
And that's a perfect segue into the next part of our deep dive, where we'll explore how to put your why into action, how to share it with the world.
I am ready. This is where it gets really good. Welcome back to the deep dive. We've spent the last 2 episodes unpacking Find Your Why, haven't we? Exploring the WHY, the HOW.
Yeah, all the good stuff.
But now comes the really exciting part. Putting it all into practice. Because it's one thing to, have this big aha moment to connect with your why.
Yeah, you've got to walk the walk, right?
Exactly. It's not enough to just, walk around with a T-shirt that says, ask me about my why.
Although that would be kind of cool.
It would. But how do you actually integrate this into your life without feeling like you're giving a TED Talk every 5 minutes?
Well, I think the key is to find authentic ways to weave your WHY into your everyday interactions. Remember those what do you do conversations?
Oh, I hate those.
Right. But instead of just stating your job title, use it as an opportunity to share your why.
So instead of saying, I'm a graphic designer, it's more like, I help businesses communicate their message visually in a way that connects with their audience.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Exactly. You're adding that layer of purpose. Remember Steve, the Steel Salesman?
Yeah.
He didn't launch into some big lecture on metallurgy.
Right.
He shared his passion for sustainability, how his work contributed to building a greener future.
It's about telling a story, isn't it? People connect with stories.
They do.
But what about when you're talking to people who already know what you do? Like your colleagues or your clients?
Yeah, that's a good point. You don't want to sound like a broken record.
Exactly. So how do you bring your WHY into those conversations without overdoing it?
I think it's about finding those organic opportunities to connect your work to that larger purpose. Let's say you're giving a presentation on a new marketing campaign.
Okay.
Instead of just focusing on the tactics, the metrics, take a moment to explain why this campaign matters.
Oh, I see. So it's about reminding everyone, including yourself, that this isn't just a job, it's a contribution to something bigger.
Exactly. And the beautiful thing is, the more you consciously integrate your WHY into your communication, the more it becomes second nature.
It's like any new habit, right? The more you practice it, the more ingrained it becomes. But let's be real, it's not always easy to stay true to our why, is it?
It's not. Life happens.
Yeah, life throws curveballs.
Yeah.
We get busy, we get caught up in the day-to-day grind. How do we stay on track when those inevitable challenges pop up?
I think you've hit on a really important point, which is that living your WHY is a practice.
It's not a destination.
Exactly. It requires conscious effort, especially when things get tough. One thing that helps is to regularly revisit the stories that led you to your WHY in the first place.
It's like creating a WHY scrapbook. Those stories can be such powerful reminders.
Exactly. Of what truly matters, those touchstones that can really ground you when you're feeling lost or discouraged.
And what happens when we stumble? Because it's going to happen, right?
Of course.
What happens when we make a choice that's not aligned with our WHY? Does that mean we failed?
Not at all. Remember, we're all human. We're not going to get it right 100% of the time. Sinek actually talks about the importance of self-compassion.
Oh, that's so important. Because it's so easy to beat ourselves up when we make mistakes.
It is. But those missteps, they can actually lead to incredible breakthroughs.
Oh, absolutely. Sometimes our biggest failures lead to our greatest growth.
Ex-
We've been talking a lot about how finding your why can bring more purpose to your work and your personal life.
Yeah.
But it's not just about personal fulfillment, is it?
No, not at all.
It's also about making a positive impact on the world around us.
You got it. Find your why is a call to action.
It is.
It's about recognizing that we all have a unique contribution to make, and by aligning our actions with our values, we can create this ripple effect.
A ripple effect of positive change.
Exactly.
I love that.
So as we wrap up our deep dive into Find Your Why, I want to leave you with this thought. Pay attention to those moments in your day when you feel truly alive, energized, aligned.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What are you doing in those moments? Who are you with? What values are being expressed?
Those are the clues.
Exactly.
This has been such an incredible deep dive, and I think it's really driven home the point that Find Your Why is so much more than just a book. It's an invitation to create a more meaningful life.
And it's an invitation to make a difference.
Yes. So to all of our listeners out there, we encourage you to check it out if you haven't already.
You won't regret it.
It's a good one. And on that note, this has been another deep dive. We'll see you next time.